This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Jeff Gardner.
Welcome to another episode of the Good Neighbor Podcast. Today we have another good neighbor on, Sarah Covey of Covey Wellness Centre. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I am as well now, knowing that you're a therapist. For the people that know me well, therapy has done wonders for my life. Just having those real, honest conversations and having an expert kind of guide me through the internal chaos that sometimes humans can live through. I would say more than sometimes for me.
Sure.
It's like this own internal discovery of going through my own Lord of the Rings journey inside me, heart, mind, and spirit. So I'm looking forward to it. Let's start from the top. What is Covey Wellness Centre? What do you do?
So Covey Wellness Centre is located in Elmvale, Ontario, and it's a central resource. It's primarily a group of psychotherapists, but we do have other healthcare one-on-one providers. So we have some one-on-one yoga coaches. We have some nutrition and fitness being added. We've at different times had reflexology and massage therapy. So it's a range of wellness services that we offer, but it's centered around that mental health component of our psychotherapy group.
Okay, so I love that. And I won't even say anything more than that. I'll just simply ask, why not just stick to talk therapy? Why add fitness? Why add nutrition? Why add yoga, reflexology, all of it?
Oh, such a good question. So our view of mental health is that it doesn't exist in its own compartment, that we are all holistic beings. And so how we live and move and eat and sleep and engage with other people, all of those things contribute to our overall wellness. And the more that people understand the interconnection of those systems and support that from a holistic level, the better they're going to do. And so to me, it feels very aligned to have a wellness center that's looking at resourcing people from all different angles, because some people might start on a yoga journey and then get into a therapy journey, or they might start a therapy journey and then start into a nutrition and exercise journey. And we don't know what their point of entry is going to be, but how can we robustly scaffold around them a bunch of other really great things that are going to help them stay healthy?
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Can I just say this or ask this? So just to put it very clearly, because there's going to be some people who have never done therapy before. There's still a stigma around therapy, although I think that barrier is being broken down rapidly, certainly
Agreed.
from my perspective over the last 10 years. I mean, I'm 38 now. 28, I would have never considered therapy. No way. I wasn't that guy. I was an athlete, like man's man type of thing.
Yep.
At 30, life did not go the way I wanted it to go. And all of a sudden it's like, well, okay, these are some of the obstacles you're facing. Here are some of the answers. And then through my 30s, this last 8 years or so, I've just seen a drastic change. More men coming into it of older age, younger ages. But let me just ask you this. If I'm in shape, I'm eating well and sleeping well, and I come to talk therapy, is the outcome going to be different for that person than someone who comes in who's not eating well, who's not in shape, not sleeping well?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because it goes to sort of optimal functioning. And so for a lot of people, if they're able to move through their lives reasonably well, they exercise regularly, they get to work, they do the things that they need to do. And so they're going through their lives reasonably well, but often those clients are people who feel stagnant or stuck in some other way. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a mindset, maybe they feel bored at work. And so you start to lean into, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but sort of expanding that, leveling them up, and dealing with mindsets, upper limit barriers, all sorts of things like that, that may be in other aspects of their life. And so again, we're all going to have different components in our lives that are going well and other components that might be stuck points. And so someone who's got the asset of a healthy lifestyle, eating, sleeping, exercise, may really, really struggle with inner criticism and be really, really hard on themselves and lacking self-compassion or lacking clarity or discernment. And so we're focusing in that area. Someone else might be coming in and they're not functioning at all. They're not getting to work. And so we might focus more of our treatment on, okay, let's focus on getting some basics together, and then we'll start to build. So really therapy from our perspective at Covey Wellness Centre, which is a client-centered perspective, you decide where you start and you're in the driver's seat of that. So we can tailor whatever you need for there to be value from that, regardless of what you bring to it or don't bring to it, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it opened it up in a way that I wasn't expecting. I love that they're in the driver's seat and they can kind of choose what,
How often
resonates
they
most
go
with
in,
them.
how
Yeah.
fast they go, how many trips we take, and you're inviting us into the passenger seat to say, I've got my maps, my rules, my snacks, my tea. We always have tea here at Covey Wellness Center. And so, you're saying, hey, I want you to come along. I'm on this journey. I'm in control of it, but I'm inviting you to come alongside me and offer me what you can do to help me facilitate and keep moving forward in my life. And it's very different for every single person. So it's always so curious when you do an intake with someone, because you're really building a program where they see this is what's valuable to me. And then usually what happens is as they start that journey, other things unfold. And so they address the boundaries with their mother-in-law or something as the thing that was the stuck point. And then they realize they really wanted to think more about their career. And so they continue. And so it just becomes a gift that you give yourself to step into these spaces where you can talk about all the things and you're in control of what's most needed. So it's very fluid. It's very organic. That's our approach. There are other approaches that are a little more, this is the program and you're doing this week and next week. But for our purposes in this private practice, we really want to focus on drawing out of the client what is most valuable to them in that point in time and moving them forward accordingly.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And I think maybe for me, as I'm listening, you say it, I'm like, maybe this is just an example of you being well beyond my scope. I think maybe I was looking at it very linearly. I just found simply this, that when I'm speaking to people and the people who give their body what it needs, essentially, some level of movement, adequate sleep, and nutrition, seem to be more open, able to focus more, able to concentrate more on what is happening in their world. Whereas if it's internal chaos because minerals aren't there, especially hormones are out of balance, it's like just sitting can be still and listening, actually listening. I've found from the people that I've worked with to be very difficult for them. So when we start having these difficult conversations, I've just found more of a barrier there and less of an openness or less effectiveness when compared to somebody who is at least dealing with the fundamentals anyways.
Yeah, it's a challenge because it's where are people willing to make the changes? And we want those basics to be in place. Of course, we're always checking in about sleep, movement, eating, stress levels, those kinds of things. But there may be people who need to make changes in mindset before they can activate their bodies. And so it's kind of looking at what's the first roadblock that they're willing to kind of get a breakthrough for, and how can they determine what they want to toggle first? Like, one of the theories in therapy is cognitive behavioral therapy. A lot of people hear about CBT. It's got some great components. And one of the components is the 5-part model, where essentially we have all these parts existing in an ecosystem. And so we can change our physical reactions. We can change our emotions. We can change our thoughts. We can change our environment. We can change all these components, and each of those changes will have a ripple effect in the ecosystem of that person's environment. Well, for some people, changing the way they're thinking is the last thing they're going to be able to toggle. But their thinking will be affected by changing other things. And you can take, if you change your environment, that's going to affect how you're thinking and feeling. Like, again, we don't live in these isolated chambers in our lives. They're, as if we're in waffle compartments, right? For all these parts of our lives, like it's all integrated. And so for me, it's about looking at what is the low-lying fruit, if you will, for this person that they're willing to start to move, knowing that movement will beget other movement, and it'll start to affect the ecosystem. And one of those choices, a good example of this is if somebody starts exercising, they naturally start drinking more water, right? They weren't planning to drink more water.
Less alcohol in many cases.
Right? Like, so there's just these ripple effects that you start to move what you can move, no pun intended with the exercise, but generally, where are you willing to focus and start to make change, and then watch how that will also lead to other change and lead to something else. And so trying to start with where that willingness is, because it's a voluntary thing, therapy, right? You've got to come and be willing to submit to the process and be vulnerable. No one's forcing you to come, certainly not in a private practice setting. So you want to really work with where they are.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're sharing with us that there's not pieces of us in these silos separated. They all are interconnected. And for someone like myself, I hear that and it's like, great, because if I go to the gym, I have cascading effects. If I work on spirituality, it's going to help that. It's going to help my relationships, my business. Someone may not think that, connecting with nature, calming yourself, meditation, and becoming present will make you significantly better at business if you are struggling with being present. So they may not think, how do I get better at business? As ultimately, this is a business podcast.
Yes.
Meditate. Why would that line up? No, I need the new closing thing, or I need the new software, or I need new staff. I love that they're all interconnected, but maybe somebody just heard all that and went, oh my God, that is so overwhelming. There's a million pieces and they're all connected together. So for the person who did just say that to themselves while listening to this, what do you say to them?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is start small. Like, the changes are not all the changes all at once. We know this from the research around New Year's resolutions. People get these great big ideas in New Year's, which is also in our circadian rhythm in the middle of the winter for Canadians, which is not a high time of high energy. And so we have this like high failure rate of people starting out with these great big aspirations and then sort of tanking on them and feeling really badly about themselves, which I think a lot of it is because they're not moving things in small enough increments to get the consistency and then the new thing and then the consistency. And so starting small, I think, is a big part of that. And don't do it alone. Like, there's a reason that there are therapists and personal trainers and nutritionists. Like, and I know in my own life, I have to remind myself of this all the time. We were talking about hormones before. So I'm a little older than you and dealing with the lovely perimenopausal journey, which is huge for women in that sort of 35 to 65, depending on when it hits you age group. And your whole life gets turned upside down, and it's impossible to navigate that without help. So who are the people around you for the various things that you need to move forward? And that could be a coach, that could be a nutritionist, that could be a sales guru, that could be a naturopath, but resource yourself with a team of people that are going to surround you and help you move those forward. I don't think we're meant to do life isolated from other people. And I've seen so much transformation in people's lives by just getting allies in the right spaces. And I can speak to that even for myself personally. I've seen that. I'm a therapist and I have to remind myself, okay, you're getting stuck here. Well, who knows the things that you don't know about hormone health to toggle your nutrition? Call them up, get their services in your life and move it forward, and don't try and go it alone. It's very distressing and there's so much to sort through. I think that's big. So start small, find your people. Those would be my two main pieces of advice to that.
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, hormones, there's been it's so hard to identify when you're enjoying your life and you look back to a time that was a struggle and, somebody asks you for advice. How did you get out of there? Give me the 1-2 main pieces of advice you did to get out of that 10-year thing, or it's been 15 years since it.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. It's not. It's really not.
Always a combination of factors. That's what I say. We always exist in a combination of factors, and there's always a combination of factors that are contributing to how we're moving through the world. So again, that goes back to our interconnectedness within ourselves and within our communities. It's hard to point to one thing, but you can start with one thing and then that'll illuminate other things. And I have seen that sort of snowball effect, if you will, of, like you said, you start to move your body and you realize, I can't get up for my early morning run if I'm drinking this late at night. So I'm only going to have one drink at 5 instead of 2 more drinks while I'm watching TV. And then turns out that you actually don't love how bloated you feel, and you start eating more protein in order to build the muscles that are getting torn down in the running you're doing. And all the while you're drinking more water, and you're finding a community of runners that are keeping you accountable, and that's inspiring you. And they're telling you about some other, stretching regime that you're doing. And you're like, oh, I should try that. And it's just in the course of that wellness journey, if you're oriented to that, you're going to continue to find things along the way to enhance that. And so how do you say, well, I stopped drinking at night. Okay, well, that wasn't the only thing, because then that also led to this. And it's all the journey. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it really is in the journey. It's in the process, and it's in the one step at a time.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. Something that I think about often is not all decisions are valued equally. Certainly in my life, there are, at this stage of my life, not being married, not having kids, kind of being married to my health and business.
Yes.
Those two things mainly, and a handful of really tight relationships. There's my 24 hours include sleep in that. And I like it that way. And that's the way it is for now. It won't be that way forever. But I try to optimize for the day. So one of the things that I think about, the main thing really is, what decisions am I making? First off, how many big decisions am I trying to make in a day? Is it 50? Because if it is, it's probably way too many. I need to make a couple. And then what is the outcome of these decisions? There's some decisions that I make that I think are big and they kind of have a short runway and not a huge outcome. Whereas learning over time, okay, if I make this decision, especially the harder ones, tend to have a larger cascading effect and outcome. So, I mean, really, for me, the books behind me, the mentors that I have in my life, big on mentors. I don't know if it was Buffett, Jobs, one of those guys, big leaders. And they're like, hire people that are smarter than you in the areas that you're not around you, and keep them around you. And you have this central little group, and you're constantly being a sponge to everybody's learning from everybody, and you're all getting smarter, faster, more intelligent. Your learning curve is going up exponentially. And so they've helped lead me to making better decisions. I look at, really, if I want to simplify my life down to the nitty gritty, especially when I'm getting stressed, it's like, what are my decisions and what are my actions? That's it. I can't control my thoughts. I think I can control which ones I lock onto and not lock onto. I can't really control my emotions bubbling up. I think I can regulate them a little bit. And again, I can act on them, choose to or not. But my body's doing its thing with or without me, essentially. What am I going to do with it? What decisions am I going to make? What actions am I going to take? And that really calms me down quite a bit, because it narrows my path when I'm looking at 1,000 different ones. So that leads me to ask you, the expert, when it comes to a lot of what we're talking about today, decisions. So if decision fatigue is real, and we are essentially a battery that will run out, and it seems like, from what I've learned, is that the brain, the organ, is a pig when it comes to calories, and it uses so much more than any other organ in the body, from my understanding. So if I have a limited amount of decisions, it would be prudent of me to learn which decisions are going to give a disproportionate outcome to the effort required to make them.
Yes.
So I think you were going to talk about sleep as being one of them. Can you touch on that?
Yeah. So sleep, sleep hygiene is the fancy term for protecting a regular routine of sleep and making that a priority in your wellness. And so, sleep is foundational. It's the body's way of doing all of the repair and rejuvenation. We think about restorative practices, and the first thing we think about is rest and having a sleep and feeling that our energy is renewed in the morning. And so if you do not have good sleep, you will have that ripple effect into all areas of your life, whether that is your stress levels, your ability to focus, your ability to relate, to tolerate other people's comments and insertions into your life. It's all foundational on sleep. So if you had to make one sort of pillar a priority, I would say sleep. And then the other thing you kind of alluded to as well that's coming to mind is your people fuel. We need people, and we are not designed to live in isolation. We need to have people around us who are life-giving in particular, and strong, meaningful relationships to be successful in any aspect of life. And so that can look like building intentional coaches around your business, or building intentional wellness providers around your health. That can be really being intentional about your friend groups and your social life and how that builds into you. But I think that, there's a lot of things that come up for people when they are too isolated, and there are limitations to your own counsel when you get stuck in your own head. And so being connected to other people and that energy that comes from that, introvert or extroverts will want more of that than introverts, but everybody needs it. And so what are the meaningful ways you're engaged with community? And if you had like a really strong, meaningful connection and community of people around you, and you had a really, really good night's sleep, you're going to get a lot of traction from that.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Two things that, for the most part are pretty much free and well within our control. It's not like if you said, well, if you could become a world-class rock climber, that would really have some outcomes on your life. It's like, damn, that is going to be tough. But most of those
especially
two
for
things,
me, you'd probably do better at that, Jeff, than me. Yeah.
So it's amazing, the little things in life that are here every day that produce so much reward, fulfillment, contentment, whatever word you want to use. They're there. We just need to tap into them and find some good people to guide us. When you said get some morning sunlight, immediately Huberman came to mind. Are you a fan of?
Yeah, sure.
He's awesome.
I mean, I think we've gotten out of touch with that. Like even you were mentioning before in the interview about time in nature and underestimating the importance of that. Excuse me. And I think that we think that the small things don't matter, but they absolutely do. And the cumulative effect of small things in one direction or the other has significant impact. So I don't know if you're familiar with The Slight Edge. I forget who wrote that book, but it's a business book. And basically the idea is the initial difference between doing something small in a negative direction in your life and something good in a positive direction. It's not that much difference.
Right.
Like, I'll give you an example. If I eat a bag of potato chips before bed, or I don't eat a bag of potato chips, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. It's sort of this, if you looked on a graph and you saw that your x-axis was your neutral, and then above is your decisions in a positive direction and below is your decisions in a negative, maybe it's a little bit above or a little bit below no chips, right?
And now map that over 3 years.
Map that over time. It doesn't even have to go that long. Even in 3 weeks of time, all of a sudden that decision either has an exponentially, like it's a slight edge. It has a slight edge, and yet the exponential dividends in a short span of time start paying off. The no chips in 3 weeks, my body starts to feel different. My sleep starts to feel different. I'm not as sluggish in the morning. Down here, I start to be bloated. I start to have restlessness in my sleep. I'm gaining weight, right? And so that's a simple example. But if you take that differential of the small things and project that over time, the consistency over time will start to have its own momentum for you. And that's true in business as well, right? Like we talk about income producing activities as people in business, right? Like how are you spending your time, and your difference between scrolling in unnecessary emails versus a networking reach out to somebody. Those two things on a given day, slight edge. But over time, if you're choosing connection and being intentional about reaching out and marketing or whatever the tool is that you're doing versus getting bogged down in administrative stuff or scrolling on Instagram, over time, you're going to see the dividends pay out. And I think that's a great thing to remember, because it seems insignificant until it gets its own momentum, and then it's really significant in your life. And
it affects everything. I mean, every facet of your life. Atomic Habits, James Clear, same thing. These tiny little tiny things that make a huge difference if you map them out. So just fantastic information. Anybody listening to that, no matter the stage in life, could benefit from what you just said. There's always the next level for someone who's doing really well, and from someone who's starting and kind of lost. Getting your sleep, that's one thing that can be dealt with today, now, and see. I mean, the people that I follow, like you said, it kind of is like the elixir to life. If you want to stay youthful, young, stave away diseases, and feel good, sleep.
Well, and I think people disparage sleep versus like, they're always like, oh yeah, I should eat better and I should move my body. But they're like, I can get up at 5 a.m. and go to bed at midnight, and that's fine. So I think that's one of the reasons to bring it on the radar too, is that people, I think, diminish its power. Right. And whereas other things are sort of more obvious, or people but they think, oh no, but I can compromise my sleep. Yeah, you can't. You can't without consequence, right? Any more than you can compromise moving or nutrition without consequence. But I think that we have trained ourselves in terms of productivity culture to eke every little thing out of every hour of every day. And so we end up with, there isn't enough hours in the day. So then we end up saying, well, I can sleep less. And that's a bad decision to make. So don't do that.
And I've been there. I know what that feels like. What is it like? 30 days without food, a week without water, 2 days or something without sleep?
I don't know.
You go nuts.
I don't know, but I know that if you do an experiment, which many of us do who are moms out there, when you get a newborn baby, you know pretty quickly how much sleep deprivation affects you. And don't forget that, because some seasons like that, you're feeding your baby in the middle of the night. It is what it is. But if you have a choice in the season that you're in, don't minimize that. It's foundational, and it will then give you energy to start to add a bunch of other things. Like some people can't add exercise in because they're too tired.
Right.
But if they get sleep, then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I feel like going for a walk because I have some energy that I didn't have before because I'm sleeping,
Yeah. Look at it as, none of us would go to bed without charging our cell phones, or end the day without charging your cell phone. You are plugging yourself in like a phone to recharge. Look at it that way, and you hopefully won't miss. Let's talk about you a little bit, Sarah. So I'm going to fire some 4 or 5 questions at you so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
Favorite place to go?
Ooh. Well, somewhere outdoors, but I'm notoriously a sunset chaser. So like driving to the edge of we live near Wasaga Beach here. And so some of the side beaches, driving to catch a sunset, that's a favorite place. But I would say my daily favorite place is the park just outside of town that I find myself walking on most of the time. I've spent a lot of days pounding the trail there with my feet, and it just feels like home. So that's my favorite.
Beautiful. Anything that guides you in life, values, philosophy, something like that?
Well, I do have a Christian faith belief, so I definitely lean heavily into that. It's actually a niche here at the center to be able to offer that to people who are looking for that. We don't offer that exclusively. But I do find that my faith and my spirituality is a really big integral part of my wellness and my peace, if I can say it like that. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
I think I already know the answer to this, so I'm going to ask this and a follow-up.
Sure.
Non-negotiable practice that you have daily, and then favorite practice that you have daily for self-help to make you feel alive.
Well, non-negotiable is sleep, if that's what you were going to guess. Yeah, that I do protect that. One practice that's really important to me that actually comes from my faith tradition, but I think is good for everyone, whether you do that or not, is actually Sabbath keeping. And so for people who may or may not know about sort of Judeo-Christian ethic around Sabbath keeping, one day, in 7 is dedicated to worship and rest. And so of your 7-day of week rhythm, you're taking 1 day out. And this used to be more apparent in our culture because we kind of had that translating to business. People were closed on Sundays. Malls were closed. You probably are too young to remember this, but even when I was a kid, there were places that were just closed on Sunday because that was from that tradition of taking 1 and 7 as a day dedicated to rest. And so for me, that's a very important spiritual practice, but I actually think it's a transformative practice and rhythm. I mean, if you can imagine if everyone, and by rest, I don't mean sitting around doing nothing. I mean, what are the things that are restorative to me? So being with my friends, moving my body, for me, going to a religious service, having connection, having a nap, not being in productivity mode, getting out in nature, any number of things that are restorative falls under that idea of practicing Sabbath and having a day of rest. And so you can imagine that if we did that as a culture, whether it was for religious reasons or not, it would really set us apart in terms of the impacts on that. It would impact families because there would one day that everybody is not going to hockey or going to run their groceries or whatever, because everything's shut down and it's quiet. And so I just think it's a really, really powerful practice, and it's a weekly rhythm. And I'm not super rigid about it, but I try to lean into it as often as I possibly can. And I've come to really crave that rhythm and believe in its goodness for us. So that might be something unique that other people don't have, but Sabbath keeping is a big passion of mine.
I love it.
Yeah.
Most meaningful activity that you cannot get enough of?
Talking with people. I love a good conversation. I love social connection. I am an extrovert. And in my job, obviously, I'm working with people, but that's very oriented to them. It's very much a listening and reflecting, and I'm good at that and love it. But when I get into a conversation that's really mutually beneficial and back and forth, like I lose track of time, some of those life-giving people fuel people in my life, like more and more of that. I can never get enough of those kinds of conversations in my life.
I agree. And I try to not think when I'm asking questions. I try to not think when I'm listening, not perfect at it. And I was thinking about my answer to that question. And the reason why I keep going to the addiction clinic on the weekend is because there are a few things in my life that have created more long-term joy than real conversations with people, where we just let our curiosity drive us. And it's like insecurities washed away after 20 minutes. And now we're just in it together. It's a fantastic thing. And to hear that you enjoy it so much it is very, very cool. Okay. Biggest fear.
Ooh. This comes from working in the field that I'm working in. Unfortunately, not everybody is proactive about their mental health. And so we see a lot of tragedy and we see a lot of trauma. And one of the hardest things for me to work with is moms who are dying. And so for me, I think my biggest fear would be to die prematurely. I have 4 children. They're older now. They're 21 down to 14, a girl and 3 boys. And I think that's one of my biggest fears, would be that something would happen, that I would leave them before I could be a meaningful part of all the things in their life that I would want to be. And because I've seen that happen, it sort of feels really close to my heart, and it's hard to work with. It's an honor and a privilege to walk with people through that. But man, moms who are my age leaving this world way too soon, that's a fear point for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's just another level of tragedy.
Yeah.
Superpower. If you are to identify a superpower that you possess, what would it be?
Yeah. So interestingly, I run a really cool community called the Expansion Space, and we talk about some of the stuff in Gay Hendricks' The Big Leap. And they talk about zone of genius. So I don't know if some of your people listening to your podcast will be familiar with his work. But I would say that I'm always working on my zone of genius. And I would say something like, it's something like blank, right? Because everybody's kind of working that out. But the best way I can describe it is I can take information and move it to transformation. So I have a teaching background. I was a teacher for 15 years before I was a psychotherapist. And so that symbiotic relationship of those two skills, I feel like I have this ability, so for the person let's say for The Big Leap. So in this expansion space that I run, the person who would read that book, but can't implement it and actually make the changes in his or her life, I can bridge that gap for them. So they could come and be a part of that community. And I have this superpower of being able to say, here's the information. Let me move that towards transformation where it's actually applicable and you're seeing it integrate and move your life in real ways. It's not just knowledge, because knowledge isn't transformation, right? We have to bridge that. And so I feel like I have this unique ability to integrate that, to teach that, if you will, but also to interact with people in such a way that I can say, this is how that gets into your bones, and makes an actual difference. It's not just an idea out there.
Yeah. And I remember listening to one of my, most impactful individuals out there. And he said the difference between a God and a human is a God can snap their fingers and take information in their head and make it reality. Whereas us, it may take years and years and years. Anyways, that was his take on a God. Blink and it's real. Whereas we're doing the same thing. It's just taking way longer, and we might even not know the necessary ingredients. So, kind of what you touched on, take it, turn it into something real quickly and effectively. That's a hell of a skill. Last two for this.
Sure.
Personal and professional goal for 2025.
So personal goal, I'll come back to that. Professional is easier to start. So my professional goal this year is to build more of an online presence so that people can have access to the work that I'm doing at different points of entry. So as you can imagine, with individual therapy, I'm the clinical director here of the clinic, and I've got some great clinicians that are under my supervision here. But my own ability to offer one-on-one therapy to people is limited. And I'm always working with a wait list, and people want to have access to working with me, but it's difficult to do. And then the other, just simply because there's only so many clinical hours in the day. And then the other challenge is that it's a high price point, right? So we are a private practice, and if people do not have access to a benefits plan, it's an investment. And I think it's a worthy investment. I obviously believe in it, or I wouldn't do the work I'm doing. But for some people, especially in this economy, that's a big ask. So I want to make more things available to people in an accessible way, so they have different, what I would call, points of entry to work with me. Yeah. So I have a free space in that online space that I'm creating, which has some levels where people can do an ask a therapist question and just get like a little blog post response back that we post. There's some interaction and discussion, some free things. Then there's a level of, you can hop into a workshop for $27 and join in on one of the topics and work with me that way. And on it goes. You can get into groups and so on, so that you can then have other places to connect with me. So my goal this year is to really build that so that there's not as much gatekeeping for people to have access to me, providing the best care I can for them and doing more of that. So that's my professional goal. That was a long way of saying it, but probably would have made sense to just say, I'm building this. Personal goal, I've been working a lot. So I'm going to be 49 in a month. So in the next year, I'm going to come up on that big birthday, and it does feel kind of looming for me. And the last 10 years have been in the last 10 years, I left teaching and went back to school and became a therapist and built a clinic and did all these things. And so one of my personal goals is just to reclaim some of my own health practices. And so I've been really focusing more on nutrition for my body as a postmenopausal woman. I've been focusing on really enjoying the teenagers who live in my house, because this is my favorite time of parenting. And just, sort of coming back to myself a little bit, I would say, as a personal goal. I'm not sure if I could capture that in all the ways, but I do choose a word every year. And my word this year is reclaim. Okay. So things that focus around sort of reclaiming some of those boundaries. I've said to a lot of people, I don't have the greatest self-preservation instinct. I tend to be very others focused, which is not uncommon for people in helping professions. And so I want to give myself a little more self-consideration this year.
I love that. Thank you for bringing us in on that. My two were protect, and protect was time. So It's interesting. Reclaim same. Similar. Yeah. A lot of business owners. And then speed. I refuse to continue to work the way we have. Just more. When you're learning a new skill, it's logical. That's like the more time I spend playing the piano, even if the quality starts to drop off, there's probably going to be some results over. If I spend 20 hours a week playing it or 80 hours a week playing it, at the end of a year, who's likely going to be better? probably the person that plays 80 hours a week. But
Sure.
the refinement kicks in over time. Your skill level goes up. The amount of result compared to the effort goes up over time. So to get faster at things, which honestly, my only way of doing that this year is removing more distractions.
Sure.
That's it. I'm not actually going to type faster, talk faster. None of that's going to happen. I'm just saying no to more. And then protecting. So really, I guess my word for this year is no. And I have it tattooed on my arm to remind me every day.
What does Anne Lamott say? No is a complete sentence.
Yeah, it really is. It's also a philosophy for life. It's a big, big thing.
One of the things I say to my clients is, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. If it's not a hell yes,
there it is.
Yeah.
If you're soft on that yes, then it's a no. Make it a big one.
Yeah.
Okay. I have asked you none of the questions that are on the questionnaire except for the first one. So thank you for letting me go down this path with you. There's certain businesses that I'm just very interested in, everything that goes with it. And especially if I kind of talk the way they do in a way, like we're speaking a similar language, then I just let my curiosity drive me. That would be my superpower. And it ends up being enjoyable for the audience anyway, because they're probably asking the same questions. But let's get on to tight for time. Okay. One thing that you wish your listeners knew about Covey Wellness Centre. One thing.
The one thing that comes to mind is, don't wait until you're in a crisis to come. We're here for you right now. Like, one of my big soapboxes for Covey Wellness Centre and in general for mental health is, you don't have to wait till things are terrible to get support. This is for you already. And so a lot of people think, well, if my marriage is not totally on the rocks, why would I reach out for marriage therapy support? Well, because you're navigating things all the time throughout the whole course of your relationship, that it helps to have somebody bring some insight and some support into that dialogue, so it doesn't become 15 years of a pattern that then you're coming in a crisis to address. And so, I think for what people would want to know about our approach here is that it's not just crisis intervention and management. In fact, we're not a crisis center in the sense of you can call us up. We're not a crisis line, right. But we are really looking at that holistic journey for people and being proactive about saying, my mental health is a priority. How can I do that? How can I give myself the gift of this as part of my healthcare team in a proactive way? Now, that's not saying that people can't come reactively. Of course, lots of people do. But if I could encourage them, I would say, don't wait till the problem feels unsurmountable, or you can't work anymore, or you're debilitated, or your person has left. Come sooner. Does that make sense?
Well, I was trying not to think and listen, but sometimes you think about your next question occasionally. And one of the things that I wanted to clear up, I've had in my head pretty much this entire podcast popping in and out of there, was I feel like most people think of therapy as a reactive service.
Totally.
The best people in my life are absolutely proactive about it.
Absolutely. It's true of any kind of health. I mean, really? If we apply that to, like, I'm going to wait to go to the gym until I'm diabetic, doesn't make any sense.
No.
Should you still go to the gym when you're diabetic? Yes. Like, you start where you are. That's not to say that it's too late, but it's to say, when it is better if you can say, you know what, before this gets out of hand, before my marriage is on the rocks, before I feel like I can't function at all at work and I'm taking a healthcare leave, before I go, I think about first responders all the time. They're often ones who wait until they're really debilitated. I think there's, the stigma is improving across the boards, but I think there's still quite a bit of stigma in first response about how they're supposed to metabolize all this trauma and just be fine. You know what? There's unlimited resources for a lot of first responders, and they don't take advantage of them. They wait until they have to be off work instead of calling after that first terrible call that they very clearly are going to have vicarious trauma over, to say, maybe I can work that through so it doesn't start to repress and build to the point where I now can't sleep, can't work, can't function. Like, let's just take care of ourselves along the way. I
Yeah.
mean, if we can do it, if we can have the foresight and the resources and the ability to do that, let's do that for ourselves wherever we can and not wait until it's overwhelming. And come if you're overwhelmed. So if we can hold, as the therapists like to say, hold both of those things to be true. I don't ever want people to hear like it's too late to come to therapy. You start where you are, but if you can start sooner, if you're just feeling sort of like you're languishing, but you're not fully depressed, don't wait till you're depressed. Come while you're languishing, right? Come while you're healthy. Like there's so many cool things that we can talk about in therapy to level up and enhance your life and explore that are just going to blow your mind. So if you're in a really great place, still come. There's so many things we can offer. So I train my team to really be adding value to all of that, approach of, being in the passenger seat with somebody in the driver's seat of their own lives. Let's just try it, see what happens. If you find the right fit, I guess that's the other thing is our approach at Covey Wellness Centre. And I believe it should be our approach everywhere, but it is for sure our approach is goodness of fit. It doesn't matter what, like there's lots of great therapy modalities and we could go down a whole rabbit hole with that. But the bottom line is it goes back to that people fuel. You have to feel a connection with the person you are working with and what we call in the field a therapeutic alliance. You have to feel like this is your person and they get you and they're there for you and you feel safe. If you don't build, if it doesn't feel like that, it takes a bit of time. Obviously, you've got to have more than one session to build that. But if after 3 or 4 sessions, you're like, it's not jiving, maybe it's a goodness of fit. And like, we just make that really normal. If you're not jiving, let's try another person because you are going to make progress when that relationship is solid and it feels like this, like, that you can't wait to come and see your therapist because they're adding so much to your life that you're looking for. That's how it should feel. So I always want to work towards that for people of prioritizing not just that proactive, but also getting the right person for you.
Yeah.
It's not, if people feel like that way about me, it's not personal to me. And I train my therapist that way. It's not personal to you if someone isn't jiving. It's just not a goodness of fit. So even if somebody, like I'm the clinical director, even if somebody after 3 sessions with me is like, I don't think Sarah's my style. Like, I don't get my nose out of joint about that because that's them discerning. I know what I'm looking for here and this doesn't feel right. So let's keep trying until it does. And you'll know when it's good.
Yeah.
So
I look at all of us as unique puzzle pieces and we're not meant to fit everybody. But if you don't get out there and try, you won't find your people. You just settle for what's around you. I call them people of convenience. It's like my work people, my gym people. It's like, well, maybe they aren't your people, but if you don't get out there and try, you won't know. And then to touch on, yeah, exactly. And then to touch on being proactive, this is why I'm so big on mentors. Put therapist and mentor, put personal trainer and mentor, business coach, life coach, whatever you want. People who are better at the thing than me that I'm doing, which is life. So somebody who's better at life, the parts of life that I'm interested in, can let me know, hey, man, you haven't started working out yet. You have no problems going on health-wise, but start working out. Or if you're not a reader, let me tell you about the value of reading rather than just reading about the problem that you're facing right now, but making it a practice, meditation, getting out in nature, whatever it is. All of these things were taught to me by other people, other people that were further in the journey than me. And so many people out there are willing to give that information away to you one-on-one, to you for free, online books.
Yeah.
The information is quality and it's out there. Find you people. I love that.
Absolutely.
Last question for you.
Okay.
Impact, huge for me. It's the thing that it is my compass, rooted in my philosophy and values. They're all part of one thing because they all lead to my impact as a human. I don't think about legacy too much posthumously. It's like, I'll be dead. So it's like, I hope I do all these things so everybody loves me when I'm dead and don't know about it. I want to see what I'm doing for people and me now. Am I making the world a better place? Am I not? I want to think of my ripple effect here today. And I have an idea in my head of what I want it to be. And that is kind of the life achievement if you will. So I think about impact a lot. It's on the arm. It's from the mentors. They've planted that seed. She was a wonderful human being, no longer in my life, but she was there in my 20s. And she's like, have you ever thought about your impact as a human? Like, you're born, you'll die. What will this equate to? I'm like, no, I'm 21. It's like girls, fast cars, parties, sports. And she changed the way I thought. And I can't imagine the direction change from this woman. So I like to ask the guests on the show, how many people out there are thinking about their impact, and what kind of answers do they have? So, Sarah, what would you like your impact to be?
Oh, man. I always think about if people have engaged with me in whatever way that is, a conversation at the grocery store, a podcast interview, a therapy session, a call, coffee date with a friend. I want them to go away feeling inspired, feeling supported, feeling loved. Like, I just think about the impact with whoever is in front of me at the time. Is their life going to be enhanced by me having been a part of it? And whatever that might look like in the moment, I'm very focused on relationships, but also feeling like that person will think that was time well spent to have had that coffee with Sarah. That was time well spent to have had that conversation, to have gone to that therapy session, to have been taught. I mean, I have so many students from my first career, like, that I would want them to think that was great to have been part of Covey's class, and so that feedback, which I have received, thankfully and humbly, but that's where I want to be living, in that space. Like, if you've had an interaction with me, I want you going away feeling good about that. I
love that it's so down to the granular. It's like your life is on the macro in the whatever, 80, 90, 100, who knows, maybe you're 150 by the time we all finish up here in this new age. But that's the macro. And it's like, let's stop poverty, or let's stop war. And it's like, that's a tough thing to do. Where do you even start? And maybe you do move towards that by just in the micro moment, make it better, because you're going to have trillions of those. And then, like you said earlier, on the X and Y axis, moment to moment, probably not that big difference, but you got that slight edge. And over 50 years, who knows how many lives you can change. I love it. I think it's fantastic. You've been a pleasure to speak to. These are my favorite episodes. Don't tell anybody that's come on here. But when I can get a health expert in some way, fitness, business, mind, I just let my curiosity like a child run, and they're the most enjoyable for me. An hour goes by in a second. So I appreciate you letting me do that with you.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. And just as a thought that's coming to mind before we close up, I think it was Mother Teresa that said, it's not about doing big things, but it's about doing little things with great love. And I think about that, as a way of being in the world. And so, maybe you are seeking to eradicate poverty, but it's going to be done one child at a time that's getting a meal, it's not in the macro, it's in the little things with great love. And that builds the legacy of somebody like Mother Teresa. So for inspiration, I'll leave people with that, if that's helpful.
Yeah, it was a bit of a mic drop. Thanks for dropping that on us, Sarah.
No problem.
Very much hope to speak to you again. Until then, you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, Sarah.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnpwithjeffandsean.com. That's gnpwithjeffandsean.com, or call 705-413-3775.